very happy to celebrate this book and this workshop with you, because it is the beginning of all the work that I've done in the last 40 years, actually. I started my private practice in 1976 after I got my master's degree in art therapy, following 2 careers, first in art and then in child development. And so my students in my first creative journal classes at the YWCA in Santa Monica insisted that I write down the prompts that I was giving them in class. And one thing led to another, and then they started bugging me about, why don't you put a book together? And I said, that would be a boring book. It would just be a bunch of journal exercises. But what makes this class really juicy is the work that you're doing. You know, the drawings, the journals, the writing is just fabulous, and people want to see that. And I said, would you contribute your work if I ask you for specific pieces? And they said, oh yeah, no problem. I said, okay. So by January of 1977, I had made a New Year's resolution that I was going to write the book. And I started writing it. I set up, the way you start to write a book, if anybody wants to know, is you set up a schedule, just like you're going to a job. And books don't write themselves, and if you wait for inspiration, you'll wait forever, so forget that. So you set up a schedule, and you show up. And you write, good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't matter what quality it is, you just pour this stuff out. Ideas, brainstorming, whatever. You don't do any editing yet. Well, I was in the first 3 weeks of my schedule, which I had set up. And because it was my first book, I had done enough in terms of creative projects in the past to know that that's the formula. You show up, you set a schedule, and you get there. So in those days I had a typewriter, and I'd show up at the typewriter and nothing would happen. So for 3 weeks, 2 to 3 days a week, I'd show up and I'd spend all this time in my office / studio, and nothing was happening, nothing was coming out on the page. So I realized I had to practice what I'd been preaching, and I had to use one of the exercises in the book, that is in the book now. I went up to my journal, and I got it out, and I started writing out what my inner critic was saying. And this is the journal entry, and it might be a little hard for you to see it, but you'll see a little cramped handwriting up in the upper right, and the rest of it is pretty large and bold and, you know, childlike. And that's because it was my inner critic, my critical parent, telling me that I'm not an author and I couldn't write. And that was going on in my unconscious while I was sitting at the typewriter. So that's why all I had was blank paper in the typewriter. So I wrote out what the critic said with my dominant hand. You're no author, you can't write. Look at the stuff you've written, it's a mess, unclear, dry, garbled. You're wasting your time, no publisher's ever going to accept this. So if you ever wondered what the cause of a creative block is, that's it right there in a nutshell. That voice is in your unconscious, it's yammering away in the background, and you're not fully aware of it, or you'd be able to handle it. And it just stops you. It'll get you depressed, it'll get you into low energy, it'll get you giving up, basically. And that's what I was suffering with for 3 weeks. So then I put the pen in my non-dominant hand, and I answered back from my inner brat. So this is an aspect of the inner child that is allowed to be angry in a very righteous way, because this is crap over here. Yeah. I'll tell you why it's crap, because I was a very good writer in school. I got all A's in English. The notes that I had taken were just notes. It wasn't finished writing. Critic is expecting finished writing. And it's telling me I'm wasting my time. And I wasn't. I was showing up the typewriter. So if you show up, you're not wasting your time. You didn't go do the laundry or pay bills or go out to lunch with your friends. You showed up. So that's not a waste of time. So logically speaking, this was all nonsense. And because of that, my inner child was really angry. And so she says, I'm going to do it anyway, in spite of you. You see, I am doing it, meaning I'm showing up. I'm at the typewriter. I am doing it. I haven't let you get me. You're the one who's wasting your time. Get lost, will you? And the get lost is really loud. Okay. When handwriting changes size, there's a lot about the volume of the voice in that. You know, even when you're sending an email, if you do everything in all caps, it's like you're shouting at the person, right? So that's what the inner child is finally doing. So I'm sharing this with you because we wouldn't be doing this workshop. I wouldn't have written this book or 17 after that if I hadn't done this journal exercise to get me to my goal. I had been very ill when I started this journal, and it healed me from a life-threatening illness that was later diagnosed as in the lupus family, which affects the collagen. I had been through 5 years of chaos and a lot of losses, 2 divorces in the family, mine and my parents. I had had mononucleosis during that time. My father had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, in those days manic depression, and given electric shock treatments, and on and on and on. And I spent a summer in bed being very ill, having side effects to medication that was giving to me erroneously. It was a wrong medication because they didn't really know what I had. So I turned to my journal, and that was what really got me through and healed me. And later on I found out what I had had at that time from somebody who did Chinese diagnostics, and was able to look in my eyes, the whites and the irises and pupils, especially the irises and the whites, and he could tell my whole health history, and he told me my health history. So I knew that he knew what he was talking about. I'd never met him. All he knew was my name and my age, and that was it. And he knew what age I was when I got sick. And he asked me how I healed myself, because there's no cure for it. And I told him about the journal and about the therapy I'd gotten into. And he said that was what did it, because there is no cure for that condition. So anybody who's dealing with a chronic illness, a life-threatening illness, or knows anybody who is, this is an incredible tool. I have a couple of friends right now who are dealing with cancer, and one of them is using this to support the chemotherapy. And she feels that the journal is making a huge difference for her. She's on Caring Bridge online, and she does a journal every day. I've written 17 books since this first one. And I have an edition of the original one here. What we've done with this book is added color. And this one was in black and white. And it's really fabulous in color. I'm really thrilled. That was a dream I had for years, to get this into color. So now you can see some really vibrant